Hi, it's Rory from counsellingtutor.com, and today I'm with Bob Cooke at the Manchester Institute for Psychotherapy.
Hello.
And we're going to talk about a subject that I have absolutely no knowledge about at all. So that's the 4 domains of psychotherapy. So I'm really looking forward to getting a free lesson from Bob here. So what are the 4 domains of psychotherapy, Bob?
Okay, this model really comes from the integrative psychotherapy literature, which is informed by transaction analysis or Gestalt. It's a way of thinking about how you meet the person in front of you. In other words, how do they reorganize themselves?
So we talk about the client here.
The client.
Yes.
Yeah. And the different therapies that actually, or the different theories that are around to determine and inform how you meet the client in front of you. And I always think of 4 domains of the self. Mm-hmm. And in fact, there's a 5th one, which I'm also going to bring in.
Okay.
1, thinking. In other words, the cognitive self.
Yes. Here.
Sorry. Feelings, sometimes called the feeling self or affect, which means the presentation of feelings. Okay?
Yes.
So we've got 2, thinking and feeling. The feeling self, the thinking self.
Yes.
Behaviours, how a person behaves in terms of the behaviours which inform change, action. So we've got thinking, feeling, behaving. We've got the physical self. In other words, feelings that get and memories which get caught and trapped in the body. Everybody operates within a physical space. And then finally, the spiritual self. And so we've got the thinking self, which is a cognitive self. We've got the feeling self, which is the affect self. We've got the behavioural self, and we've got the physiological self, as well as the spiritual self. So I want to talk particularly about the first 4, and then the 5th.
Okay. So it sounds like it's a very holistic approach. It sounds
Correct.
like it's addressing all of the...
Like a system.
A system.
A systemics, if you like.
So how would you use this in your meeting with a client, in your therapeutic meeting with a client? How would that play out in the therapy room?
Okay, so each person will present differently according to their personality structure. So that is why you've got therapies that appeal to different ways of being.
Ah, that's an interesting position, isn't it?
Yeah. So for example, if we take the concept of change,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I mean, we're all in the business of change, helping the person change and get better. And then over the years, decades and centuries now, from Freud, who looked at the unconscious,
Yes.
to a lot of the modern day psychotherapies to do with CBT, which is to do with cognition and
Yes.
behaviours, and to do with massage therapy and some of the physical therapies,
Sure.
right the way up to spiritual therapies.
Mm.
But they're all about helping the person enhance their well-being and change and alleviate their distress.
Yes.
The question is, which is the best method to help the person do that?
Yes. And so what is the best method of helping people do that?
Well, this is what I'm talking about. I'm saying, I believe
Yes.
it's an integration of the self.
Yes. Yes.
And that we can split these different domains off and help the person change their thinking or looking at their thinking, help the person look at their feelings or being aware of their feelings and repressed feelings. We can help people look at their physiological ills and how they armour themselves in terms of being strong, in terms of repression of feelings. We could look at things like headaches. We can look at, prolapse discs. We can look at back pain. We could look at gout. We could look at physiological symptoms which actually have a psychological...
Yes, because it all comes from here, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It all comes from here.
Yeah. We can look at the spiritual world. Whatever domains of the self we look at, I believe for complete change, we need to visit each of the domains of the self, so we have true integration.
Yes.
So in a very systemic way.
So a sense of addressing all the aspects of the person. It's a whole person approach. And I think it's really interesting that, when you talk about, CBT, a lot of people, maybe people watching this, would think that is a definite strand of therapy, and to some extent it is. Yeah. But it's amazing how getting people to think slightly differently about their circumstances is a feature really in all therapies, isn't it? Yes. It's not just a domain of CBT, it goes across the whole spectrum.
That's correct. And going back to your question about, someone presenting and how you help them change, people have a favourite way of presenting to you. In other words, a favourite way of being with you.
Yes.
So you may come alongside a client by actually concentrating on their preferred style of conversation. So, in other words, you might get people who concentrate a lot of their energies on thinking, on cognition, and they feel secure and safe talking to you about their thoughts, about thinking changes. Yeah, but they will perhaps not be so happy in talking about feelings.
Yes.
Or not so happy talking about physiological change, or not so happy talking about changing their behaviours. So what's important for a psychotherapist is to concentrate on where the preferred style is of the client, to enable them to be aware of perhaps areas they don't concentrate on. And of course, if you concentrate on their preferred style, you're going to get a more easier working alliance, there's going to be more trust, and they're going to be able to have a relationship with you which is built on their preferred style. Now, at the end of the day, as I said, a lot of the problems happen for people because they're not concentrating on the other parts of the self,
yes,
which they've neglected.
Yes.
So can I give an example? Yeah.
Also.
So for example, let's take obsessions. Yeah, now I can talk about depression in a minute. We'll just take obsession. Yeah.
Okay.
People who obsess, besides doing that to structure time, besides doing that to actually attempt to find a solution, besides doing that to placate the parent in their head, they also do it as a defense against feeling. Now, you need to get to their feelings, which is probably where they need to go to actually change to cure some of the obsessions. You also need to go actually to another area which they will defend against, is behavioural change. They will often get hooked on thinking changes rather than the feelings that are generated,
yes,
or the anxiousness or the fear which drives the thoughts.
Yes.
So you need to enable them to get to areas they're not aware of, or they may not be happy to go to.
So initially working with that preferred working style and the initial contact to build the alliance, and then as the picture of the client starts to emerge, start gently maybe walking them into that area that they may not be used to inhabiting.
Correct.
Could be a behavioural change, could be a connection with emotions.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, another example, depression.
Yes.
What's the classical thoughts often people talk about depression? Oh, there's anger turned inwards.
Yes.
A lot of truth in that. People depress themselves in order often not to go towards feelings.
Yes, and in my practice it's amazing how many clients have voiced the feeling of risk or fear about going into that undiscovered or less talked about part of themselves.
Absolutely. So, as a psychotherapist, I always bear in mind the 4 domains of the self: thinking, feeling, behaving, the spiritual self as well, and the physical self. And then I think, well, what areas perhaps aren't we talking about? What areas of the self is the person defending against? Because every time they're defending, then we are against a particular area of self. We're actually only utilising part of their energy. So it's an integrative system. That's what I'm saying. You have to go to all parts of the self for pure change.
To access all of the individual.
Correct. And the energy.
And the energy.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in the spiritual side, Bob, because I think people may get confused, with spirituality and religion. Sometimes they're connected, sometimes they're interchanged. So when you talk about the spiritual side, what kind of examples can you offer for that?
Well, if we look at the 12-step program,
yes,
or the addiction programs,
yes,
when people go into rehab to look at their alcohol problems,
yes,
their addiction programs, their gambling programs, their smoking addictions, or whichever way you look at this, they have programs which often talk about a higher sense of self.
Yes.
So when I talk about spirituality, we're talking about a higher sense of self.
Yes.
There's another way of looking at it, that there's always a spiritual higher sense of self in us always, in terms of essence. So what I'm saying, it's about, for me, it's about the person getting to the essence of themselves, which have always been there, really. We may want to call that a higher sense of self. We might want to call that God within us.
Yes.
But you see, it's the part of ourselves which is uncontaminated. The part of ourselves which holds a higher essence, I believe. There's a part of ourselves which we need to access, I believe, to allow ourselves to have compassion with ourselves, to embrace our vulnerability, to get the higher, pure essence of all of us, to help combat the areas which we have difficulty in.
Yes.
So meditation would be useful.
Yes.
There's a huge movement now in mindfulness.
Yeah, well, that's very, very popular in the psychological or the therapy world, isn't it? Mindfulness and and that higher sense of self. So
contemplation.
Yes.
Reflection. Looking at our inner being, our connection with our inner being and the external world, our pure essence within all of us. That's what I mean by spirituality.
Sure. And there's a wonderful story about Gandhi, who was being interviewed, and the interviewer said, if you get the train that's an hour earlier, we'll have an hour's time. So he got on the train an hour earlier, and when he got to the station, Gandhi sat on the form near the station and kind of sat and thinking, and the interviewer said, well, why aren't we doing things? And he said, well, I'm using the hour that I've saved. and that's a wonderful of example, I think, of just taking time for self and being reflective and just thinking about your place in the whole gamut of things. But you're right, it's about accessing all of us, and when we come to those domains, that's all of us, isn't it?
Yeah, and if I had to draw this, I'd have 4 sides. I'd have the thinking self, the feeling self, the physiological self, the behavioural self, with the spiritual self connecting the whole 4 at a meta-perspective level.
Right. Well, there we go. So I've just learned so much in this small time.
Good.
And I've enjoyed that, and I hope the people who are watching you've enjoyed that. If you're a therapist in training, it may inform your practice. If you're a student, that may maybe give you food for thought. And if you're just someone who's floated by maybe on YouTube,
I hope so.
Yeah, it's just an interesting
model.
idea, a model, yes. So thank you for sticking with us, and thank you for watching. Thank you.
Bye-bye.